Hi everyone, so this is the 2023 final exam, and these were the two poems that were asked in that exam. It was Gen Lucia and Sproeireën. So we're just going to go through the memo and the answers, and hopefully that will also just help you understand the way they ask the questions a little bit better and what your potential answers can be. Now with Gen Lucia, I think it's a very overwhelming poem when you look at it at first because it is so long. I think it's the longest poem that you'll do, but actually it's not one of the most difficult. It's just a little bit overwhelming. The whole idea, and I just wrote that there, visverkoper verduidelik aan iemand wat oor die prys van die vis kla, hoe moeilik die lewe van 'n visserman is. So someone who's selling fish is explaining to someone who wants to buy the fish, but they're complaining about the price of the fish, how difficult the life of these fishermen actually are. In the poem, they tell us about it's not only bad, when they have to go and catch fish, because it is very dangerous. If there's a storm, they could die. And there have been some of these fishermen in the community that have died at sea. But he's like, when the storms are so crazy and the fishermen can't go out to catch fish, they also don't have money to live. So it's this overall thing about like, how dare you complain when the life of a fisherman, no matter whether they can catch fish or they don't catch it, it's a difficult life. So that's the overall idea. So with the first question, it actually said, and always read the instructions. Don't assume if you see things, you know exactly what they're expecting you to do, right? Always read the first sentence. That is like either they're making a statement or they're giving you the instruction with these kinds of questions. So voltooi die volgende paragraaf korrek deur 'n woorde uit die gedig te gebruik. So it says, complete this paragraph correctly by taking either a word or words from the poem. So you didn't have to come up with these words, you have to take it from the poem. So die vissers ken die see, the fishermen know the sea. Alhoewel die see lyk, is dit eintlik baie gevaarlik. So even though the ocean looks it is very dangerous. Now this is somewhat asked chronologically. It is a long poem, but it's asked chronologically. So if you go back to the beginning, it basically says that hy lyk nou, because remember the hy refers to the ocean. It's blink geskuur, which means it's completely flat. There are no waves. And kalm. I feel like the easiest word out of this to take is kalm because it's very similar to the English word. So you have kalm there, blink geskuur. Or you could have actually given this whole quote. Then B. Wanneer 'n breeze in 'n kwaai verander, moet die vissers om hul lewens veg. So when the breeze changes into a rough the fishermen have to fight for their lives. And they actually give this like directly in line 8. Maar word die breeze 'n bulderende wind. When this breeze turns into a strong wind is when it becomes a problem. And as you can see, you could have added these adjectives to it, but the main word you had to have there was wind. Then C. As die storms nie nie, kan die vissers nie uitgaan om vis te vang nie. If the storms don't the fishermen can't go out to catch fish. And we get that here, it says, wat van die storms wat nooit op 'n raas. And then they give the explanation here about the fact that they actually can't go out and, go and catch fish, but they also don't have the wood to make fire. And so it then obviously dumps them into this time frame where they don't have money to buy anything. So it's op 'n raas. And then D, vissers wat wel op see is wanneer die storm baie erg is, kan doodgaan as hulle net een gaan. So it says, but fishermen who are well at sea when the storm starts, what can happen to them? Well, they can die if they only do this one thing. And what it comes down to, it says here, ons wat net een ou misstapie moet gee en hy kom tromp op ons afgestuur. So it says, if you give one misstep, then you would die. Because the whole thing is, and I think we all understand that, if the waves are too rough, you can't go in to the sea or the ocean to go and catch fish, but you also can't come out. Like, you have to go in, as far as I understand, with the boats when the sea is calm and the waves aren't too intense. Then 9.1.2 lees strofe 5, so they're asking you to read stanza 5. So just remember, in this poem, the small little one-line stanzas, they're obviously also stanzas. So we are looking at this stanza that says, the night is coming, where do we get our help? Death is standing, waiting for us in front of the door, and just one more step and we are going to be dead, and potentially, we're going to die in the ocean. That's what they're saying. So it says you have to read that again. And then it just says, choose the correct word out of these in brackets. So, ja, sleep die swart wind, die swart nag mee. So, yes, the black wind drags the black night. Yeah. So die spreker herhaal die woord swart om te beklemtoon dat. So the speaker in the poem repeats the word black, swart, to emphasize that either dat baie donker is, it's really dark, Or 'n situasie op see lewensgevaarlik is, the situation at sea is like life-threatening. Now, yeah, obviously when we do poetry, it has a lot more to do with the figurative than it has to do with the literal. So obviously, yeah, yes, like it is going to be dark and that is a problem, but what they are looking for here is the more figurative thing. So it is 'n situasie op see lewensgevaarlik is. The situation at sea is life-threatening. Then B, gee hy nog net een tree, and the een is emphasized, right? So he just gives one more step. Die spreker beklemtoon die woord een om te wys, so the speaker emphasizes the word one to show hoe na aan die dood die vissers op die boot is, how close the fishermen on the boat is to death, or dat die mense wat hulle kom help naby is, the people coming to help them is close by. I think this one is much more obvious than the others. The answer is hoe na aan die dood die vissers is, because if you give one more step, they're going to be dead. 1.1.3 Die invloed van die see in strofe 7 en 9 verskil van mekaar. Hoe beïnvloed die see die visserman se lewe volgens strofe 7 en strofe 9? Jy moet in jou antwoord na strofe 7 en strofe 9 verwys. So they're saying the influence of the ocean in stanzas 7 and 9, they differ from each other. And then they ask, how does the sea influence the fisherman's life according to stanza 7 and 9? And obviously you have to refer to both of them. So if we go back here, that was 5, so this is 6, and this is 7, 8, 9. In this one is where they are talking about the fact that if the storms are so crazy that the fishermen can't go out to catch fish, they live in extreme poverty. That's what they're saying. Okay, you literally says you have your house, you have no fire, nothing. And then 9 says, but if you are at sea and there's like a really, really crazy storm, the reality is that if the waves are so intense and so crazy, you could potentially die. That's what it's saying here. So what is the difference between these two? So in strofe 7 lees ons dat. In stanza 7 we read that. Die vissers in hulle huise moet bly wanneer die storms te erg is. The fishermen have to stay in their houses if the storms are too bad. But then this one I think is the most common one, or the really important one. Hulle nie kan geld maak nie. They can't make any money. You can also mention, how do we know they can't make any money? Daar is nie hout vir die visserman se vuur nie. There is no wood for the fisherman's fire. Anything in that line. But then in stanza 9, they also said you could have used this quote. So keep in mind, you can quote. In stanza 9, they emphasize hoe gevaarlik die see kan wees. They're emphasizing how dangerous the sea can be. And they talk about the fact that the fishermen can fall into the ocean and drown. And also, again, you could have given this quote. Then 9.1.4, it says, kies die begrip uit kolom B wat by die aanhaling in kolom A pas. So they're saying, choose the concept in column B that matches the quote aanhaling in column A. So again, I always say try and eliminate things. Like, go through them first, try and eliminate. You have more than enough time to actually do that in this paper. So we have grys golf and the GG's underlined for you. Okay, so that should be explanatory. Then hy vreet mos aan in gewande nes 'n krab. That nes should be the giveaway of what, figure of speech it is. Then hy wat met groen jaloerse oë na ons gluur. He that is staring at us with green jealous eyes. Remember, in this case, the he is constantly referring to the ocean. So keep that in mind. And then hulle slaap al drie agter die kerkhofmuur. All three are sleeping behind the church, basically. And so what they're trying to say there is like they're all dead. So the one thing that doesn't fit, and maybe it wasn't that easy for you all to realize, but here we have the GG, so it's easy to know that has to do with something with sound. The nest tells us that it can't be a metaphor, right? Because nest, like we have that word there, it had to then say he is a crab. That's how we would know that it's a metaphor. Here, the ocean is given eyes, okay? And then this is making something that is harsh softer. So the one thing that does not fit in here is a metaphor. That is the one thing that does not fit at all. Okay. So here they have grys golf is alliterasie. That should be easy because of the underlining of the GG, right? So we've used alliterasie. Then nes. Nes tells us that it is a vergelijking. But they've also said that you could have used personification here. I just think it makes it a little bit more complicated because you think you can only use one thing once. Because here again, they refer to the hey, who's the ocean. And when the ocean doesn't eat. See the jealous eyes, looking at us with jealous eyes. That is the A personification. And then saying they are sleeping behind the church, which means they're dead, it makes something that is harsh softer. It is a euphemism. Then this one, just choose the right answer. Die spreker se toon teenoor die koper meneer is, the speaker's tone towards the buyer, the meneer, is A, tevrede means satisfied, B, verwijtend, which means like kind of not hateful, but yeah, they kind of like, they hate the fact that this person is so privileged that they can stand there and complain about the price of the fish without understanding how bad the life of the fishermen are. Opgewonde is excited and manipulerend is manipulative. So the obvious one that fits is B. 9.1.6, lees reels 36 tot 39, read lines 36 to 39. So if we go here, it is basically basically this stanza. So it talks about the woman who lost her children. Okay, she thinks they are going to bring them on time for tea, but then all three of them are sleeping behind the church wall, which means they are all dead. Hoekom kan ons sê dat dit wat die spreker in reels 1 tot 35 vir ons van die see vertel, in reels 36 tot 39 bewys word? So why can we say that what the speaker is telling us in lines 1 to 35 about the ocean, talking about how dangerous the ocean is, about how people can die, that you have to be so careful? So how, after we read all of that, is that proven, bewys means proven, in lines 36 to 39? And then it just says you have to refer to what happens in lines 1 and 35 and 36 and 39. So the whole idea is, in lines 1 to 35, wys die spreker vir ons hoe gevaarlik die see kan wees, en jy also dood kan veroorsaak. Ek call your death. So anything about the dangers and that you can die. But then, how do we know that? What is the proof? And basically, in lines 36 to 39, we say that they are, and they even said you can use the quotes, hulle slaap al drie agter die kerkhofmuur, all three her sons are dead. Okay, so you could have said, mevrou Matthäus se seuns wat op die see gesterf het, shows us that this is truthful, that's very dangerous. 9.1.7, waarom is die gebruik van retoriese vrae in hierdie gedig gepas? So there's rhetorical questions in this poem because he's asking the person who wants to buy the fish, but he's not really expecting an answer from him. So how do we know these rhetorical questions are effective, basically, and suited for this poem? There's quite a few answers. I'm not going to go through them all. But the first one they say is, even though it should come across as a dialogue, it's not. It's a monologue. The speaker is speaking to himself. Die spreker praat eintlik met homself. And then the other one is, daar is niemand om die spreker se vraag te beantwoord nie. There's no one to really answer the speaker's question. And then die spreker verwag nie 'n antwoord nie. He doesn't expect a question. And then this one, I think, which daar is nie regtig antwoorde op die spreker se vraag nie. There aren't really answers on the speaker's questions. And then this one, I think this is the one that in my head just makes the most sense. Die spreker ken alreeds die antwoord. The speaker already knows the answer, but he's doing this to emphasize how dangerous the ocean is. He himself potentially has been a fisherman, and he's friends with fishermen, and so he understands the dangers. So he does not for one moment expect that this person who lives a somewhat privileged life would actually understand. He's not expecting an answer back. 9.1.8, dan sê jy nog meneer, die vis is duur, line 5, and then you still say that the fish is expensive. En jy sê nog meneer, die vis is duur, and you still say meneer that the fish is expensive in line 10. In hierdie twee reels plaas die digter klem op nog, reel 5, en jy in reel 10. So in these two lines, the poet emphasizes or places the emphasis on the word nog, still, and jy, you, who's the person that the speaker is speaking to in the poem, like the guy buying the fish. Wat wil die digter vir die leser hiermee sê? Say, what is the poet trying to tell us as the reader about this? Why are those words being emphasized? So the whole idea comes down to in line 5, met die woord nog wil die digter, and I just highlighted this, die koper daarop wys dat hy of sy aanhou om die prys van die vis te bevraagteken. This person continues questioning the price of the fish, beklemtoon dat die koper nie die boodskap kry nie. It's emphasizing the idea that this fish buyer is not getting the message about that the price of the fish does not equate to like the price of the labor and the emotional and like literally paying with their lives turmoil that these fishermen go through. And then in line 10 with the word jy, it's just trying to say that again, you don't understand how expensive or like difficult it is, how dangerous it is. So die leser of koper daarop wys dat hy of sy nie weet hoe gevaarlik die see is nie, maar maak klaar, they don't know how dangerous it is to work at sea, but they still complain about it. Or het die meneer met die boodskap kry, he wants the person to get the message. Beklemtoon dat die koper dink hy weet beter, emphasizes that the buyer thinks he knows better. Focus op die persoon wat nie kennis van die omstandighede het nie. Focusing on the person who doesn't actually have knowledge about the circumstances that these fishermen are in, because he's saying you don't understand, we do. You don't because you aren't part of it, but we do. And then all you could have said this whole thing, die jy verstaan nie hoekom die vis dier is nie, en die nog beklemtoon dat die vissers ontsteld is, dat jy nie verstaan waarom die vis dier is nie. So the you doesn't understand why the fish is expensive, and the nog emphasizes that the fishermen are still really upset that the you still doesn't understand. Even after hearing all of this, the you still doesn't understand why it is so expensive. And then the other poem I got was Sproeireën. So I remember when I was marking, the first time we got these poems, some of the people have been marking for a very long time. They say it's usually, not always, obviously, we don't know the rhyme or the reason, that they would ask, if they ask a very long poem, that they would sometimes put one of the shorter poems with it. So that's actually what happened here. They took a very long poem, 40 lines, and they put it with the poem that's only 15 lines. So Sproeireën, I feel like it's a very easy poem. Sproeireën, I cannot keep a straight face when we have to interpret this poem or analyze this poem because, yeah. But it says, spreker word aan die vrouens in sy lewe herinner deur sekere reuke. So it's saying like, the speaker in this poem is reminded of the women in his life and women in general by certain smells specifically, like scents specifically and flavors. So this one, I feel like the questions of Sproeireën they were very nice. So 9.2.1, on watter twee spesifieke persone dink die spreker? So here it says, of which two specific people does the speaker think? Because remember there's one wife person where he's like, oh, it's someone, I'm not 100% sure who that is. But that is not specific, right? Because they can't remember. So the two specific people that he refers to the women is saying Noi, his girlfriend potentially, or just like his loved woman in his life, and then say Oma, his grandmother. Voltooi die sin hieronder, complete the sentence. 'n Strofe wat uit 4 reels bestaan is. So here they expected you to have the knowledge, and we do go through this, the knowledge of what we call a stanza that only has 4 lines. It's a quatrain. So yeah, even if you spell it wrong, you would get the mark as long as you don't do the English spelling. There shouldn't be a Q anywhere there. Nowhere there. Okay, quatrain. 9.2.3, watter sintuig word hoofsaaklik in hierdie gedig gebruik? So what sense is mainly used in this poem? It's all about the smell. Okay, so it's reuk. Reuk is the noun, basically, the sense. And they also accepted the reik, but I think always be careful with this because that might not always happen, because reik is the verb. 9.2.4, daar's 'n vrou in elke geur, line 4, so there's a woman in every flavor. Noem een spesery wat die spreker aan 'n spesifieke mens laat dink. So name one spice that makes the speaker think of someone specific. He says his granny is in kaneel, which is cinnamon, and then like that other woman that he can't remember, I believe, is in anise. And anise is aniseed. Then B, wat kan ons aflei uit die spreker se verwysing na die verskillende geure? So what can we infer about the speakers referencing these different flavors? And I just highlighted these ones where it said different flavors makes him think of certain women in his life. Okay, skep herinnering. You could also say it creates memories. And then spreker het 'n groot waardering vir vroue. The speaker has great appreciation for women, and elke vrou word deur haar unieke geur onderskei. He says like every woman is differentiated, or you can know that they are unique by their specific unique geur, which is flavor. 9.2.5 hou die hele gedig in gedagte, so keep the whole poem in mind. Gee een woord uit die gedig wat vir ons sê dat die inhoud iemand se eie persoonlike siening is. So give one word out of the poem that tells us this poem, the content of this poem, is someone's own personal viewpoint, okay? And so if we're going to look at pronouns. You always look at pronouns. So we have my here, which makes it like, the message can still be universal, but this specific things that happened is very unique to this person. So we have my, I think we have my quite a few times in here. I think somewhere, where else do we have, what other pronouns do we have? My Oma and Kaneel. We have my here again. My here again. And we have ak. Okay, so I know. So those personal pronouns tell us. So you could have given ak or my. And then kies die korrekte antwoord of woord. Ons kan sê dat die inhoud van hierdie gedig 'n sterk denotatiewe of konnotatiewe betekenis het. So we can say that the content of this poem has a strong denotatiewe, which is literal, or konnotatiewe, a figurative meaning. And it's figurative. It's quite figurative. Okay? Remember, I think I said this before as well, when it comes to poetry, we are majority of the time analyzing the figurative aspects of the poem. 9.2.6, lees weer strofe 2. So they want you to go and read stanza 2 again. So it's this one. Okay, where he talks about when he peels the nachi and he gets like the kind of, I don't know how to say this, the juice from the nachi. He is taken back to this memory of like where he grew up and going into like I think, is it nachi, like all the orchards, I believe. And yeah, like, and he remembers how a woman can console him and stuff like that. So it says, nou watter vrug verwys die sproeireën waarvan die spreker praat. So what is the sproeireën referring to? It's a narkie, a nachi. That's how you spell narkie in Afrikaans, with just one A, not with two. 9.2.6b, waar kom die sproeireën vandaan? Verduidelik dit in jou eie woorde. So here important, it says, where does the sproeireën come from? Okay, but you have to explain it in your own words. You couldn't really take anything from the passage. So, or the passage, doesn't say the poem. So it says, hy buig of knak die naartjie skil tussen sy vingers. He's actually like playing with the naartjie peel in between his fingers, and then that happens. And then yeah, the third one, they just said, dit kom van die naartjie skil af. It comes from the naartjie peel. I don't know if you've ever opened a naartjie sometimes, if you're like a little bit too intense with it, or you break it accidentally. Yeah, there's something that sometimes, yeah, there's juice that comes out. And then 9.2.6 C, noem 2 positiewe herinneringe wat hierdie sproeireën vir die spreker bring. So name 2 positive memories that the sproeireën brings for the speaker. So it says, hy onthou die jare in die omgewing van die swart verloos. He remembers like his youth where he was basically growing up. So they even give you this quote. Dit laat hom dink aan hoe 'n vrou kan troos. It makes him think about how a woman can console him, make him feel better. So weet hoe 'n vrou kan troos. So he could have used the quotes. 9.2.7, kies die korrekte woord uit die tussen hakies, so choose the correct word. In reël 7 en reël 9 is die woordorde verander. So it says in line 7 and line 9, the word order is changed. So in line 7, it says breek uit die klein sproeireën. It should say die klein sproeireën breek uit. That's what it's supposed to say. And naai die woorde weer van swart verloos. Weer die woorde van swart verloos is what it's supposed to say. So why was the word order changed? It's purposeful and it has a name. Hierdie stylfiguur staan bekend as elisie of inversie. So this style is known as elisie or inversie. Inversie is the word that we have for swaps around word order. Elisie is usually when you keep out, like if I say act, I kept out the whole het and I just added the T there. That's what elisie is. 9.2.8, waarom is strofe 1 en strofe 3 ingekeep? So why is there an indentation for stanza 1? Do you see it doesn't start immediately at the top? And stanza 3. Why is that happening? Die refrein. It has a refrain, like a chorus basically. And jy beklemtoon die kernboodskap van die gedig. It emphasizes the main idea of the poem, which is that women are great and women are unique. And each and every one of them has their own specific flavor. And then dat the lyriese gedig is, it shows us that it's a lyrical poem. 9.2.9, kies die korrekte woord om die sin mee te voltooi. Choose the correct word to complete the sentence. Al is die inhoud baie persoonlik, even though the content of this poem is very personal, het hierdie gedig 'n tema omdat mense oral daarmee kan identifiseer. It has a what kind of theme where everyone can actually kind of identify with it. So the first one says literary. I feel like, again, we eliminate first. Does that make sense within the context of this? No. Then it says fictieve, fictional. Again, that's not really a theme now, is it? Or doesn't affect like a lot of people can unidentify with it. Then universele, universal and alledaagse, which means everyday. But the whole idea when everyone can relate to it, identify with it, it is universeel. And then universal. 9.2.10, die inhoud van die gedig is waarderend van aard. So the content of this poem shows appreciation. Verwys na die gebruik van die ellips in reël 14 en die uitroepteken aan die einde van reël 15 om te motiveer waarom hierdie stelling waar is. So refer to the use of the ellipses in line 14 and the exclamation mark in at the end of line 15 to motivate why this statement is true, that it shows appreciation. So if you go to line 14 and 15, 14 has daar's iemand in our nice, and then an exclamation mark at the end of like saying with excitement that there's a woman in each and every flavor. So why did this happen? Met die ellipse tussen iemand en iemand beklemtoon die spreker dat daar altyd iemand, 'n vrou in sy lewe was. He's emphasizing here that there's always been a woman, someone in his life that was helping him. Okay? Die spreker sukkel om te onthou wie dit is. Like, he's struggling to remember who's associated with Annie Seed, but he knows it's a woman. He knows that. And then in line 15 with the exclamation mark, it shows die spreker se blydskap, tevredenheid teenoor vroue. The speaker shows his joy and like satisfaction towards women. And then dui op die spreker se bewondering of verwondering vir vroue, his admiration for women, that's what it shows. And then also beklemtoon dat vroue uniek is. It emphasizes that women are unique because he's saying there's a woman in each and every flavor. I feel like this is the easiest one to write out of all of them and maybe the most common one. So yeah, those were those two poems. Hopefully I'll get through all the other ones before the end of the day. But yeah,